are gearing up for the draft just about a month away, Brock, and you're going through the players that you've seen, that you've run across, that you've maybe had a little bit of an extra opportunity to know in various ways and study, and players that you think are just good fits for the Seahawks, not necessarily at number 16, not necessarily your top 10 list, just the guys you think work for the Seahawks every day at 9 o'clock.
The Seattle Seahawks select.
This is Brock Huard's draft profile.
You want traits? Check. You want a vocal leader? Check.
At the end of the day, you have to say, okay, what's best for the organization?
Can you make people around you better, and can you bring people together?
Every day at 9 a.m. leading up to the draft.
And this morning, number 19 on my list, number 1 in my heart, Husky defensive end, Brillan Trice. Kind of low on this scale. You may have thought, as much as I've talked about him over the last couple years, he'd be a top 10 guy for me. He's a little bit lower because when I talk about those traits and checking those boxes, unfortunately for him, that's the one area that he does not. 32-inch arms may not seem like that big of a deal in the NFL, Salk, but they are. When you're an edge rusher and you've got to hold an edge, you've got to sustain an edge against the grown men in the NFL, and those tackles and tight ends that are a little bit different than the guys at Oregon State and Cal and Stanford and other places that you dominated, you got to have some of those traits on the edge. Now, he's 6'3.5" at the combine. He was 245. That was telling to me. 245. I went back and looked at my board. My board had him at 274 at Washington. 245 to 274 is a big swing. And that tells me that Bralen's a guy that can move that weight around a little bit. He wanted to go to that combine and be as twitchy and as fast as possible because he and his agent knew that even though it's 6'3.5" is good height, 32-inch arms is not. So I better run and I better jump. Well, he ran 4.72. That's a good number. It's not a great number. You know, the elite guys at the top of this draft, the Dallas Turner, the Jared Verses are in the 4.5s. So you would love to see and there was talk early in the year, mid-year, late year, Brillan Trice maybe being a first-rounder. You're not seeing him. And frankly, I'm not seeing him in Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 list. And that's because, well, we get real tradey the closer we get to the draft. And the draft is 4 weeks from Thursday. So 32-inch arms, 4.72, that would say mid-round pick. But then the production is just off the charts. Went back and looked at my board. In 2022, Salk, he led the country with 80 pressures. 70 pressures. He led the country. It was Will Anderson behind him. Yeah, Will Anderson was behind him in the number of times this dude in 13 games pressured the quarterback. On a Husky defense that struggled a little bit at times, mightily at times, there was one guy that did not. There was one disruptor constantly, and his number was number 8, and he was on the edge, and he was wreaking havoc on anyone and everyone. He did it for 13 games in 2022. It's why he was all-conference. It's why he was a second-team All-American. It's why the guys at Pro Football and gals at Pro Football Focus loved him, and he had a tremendous year. Well, fast forward to 2023. And I will say this, and I will say this confidently. The University of Washington does not get to the national title game and go 14-0 without Brillan Trice. There is no chance. If he was not playing on the defensive side of the ball, as good as their offense was, and they were, as dynamic and as talented as all those guys are going to get drafted, and Fautanu and Roma Dunze and Michael Penix, largely in the first round, they do not get to 14-0 without Brillan Trice. He was that disruptive. Once again, leading the team in pressures. Once again, one of the top guys in all of the country in pressure rates, getting and constantly harassing the quarterback. He was a two-time defensive player of the year for the Huskies. He was a team captain. He was a two-time first-team all-conference. He was a first-team Pro Football Focus All-American, because when you put the tape on and you watch him, you see a total disruptor. Ask Quinn Ewers and those two Texas tackles they're going to play in the NFL what it was like to block number 8. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. And he was a force in that game. He was a force for the last 25 of 26 games in which he played, and he was available. I love the durability. I love the availability. And frankly, if he were 6'4", Salk, if he were an inch taller and his arms were 2 inches longer and he ran a 4.5, you know what he would be? A first-round pick. It's crazy. It's crazy the difference that makes.
Ifs and buts were candies and nuts.
I know. And he doesn't have the traits, and he's going to be available in maybe the third round for those Seahawks, and for a group that needs guys on the edge who know how to play. Derek Hall and Darrell Taylor, you know what they have? Traits. Long arms, run, body beautiful, look the part. You know what they did not have in college? Production. You know what this guy has? Unbelievable production. No matter who he played, no matter what tape you put on, the guy was a constant harassment and force. You want traits? You want production. I think you need both to build a football team and an NFL team at that, and he would be a guy that I would love in the mid-rounds to see fall to the Seattle Seahawks.
All right, that is today's draft profile from Brock Huard. We do that every day here leading up to the draft.
This just feels
at
good.
9 o'clock. I know how much you love that because
really
these
do.
guys are your favorites, right? These are all your favorite guys.
Yeah, and there's going to be, let's see, for sure 2 more Huskies. For
Okay.
sure, maybe 3, but for sure 2 more Huskies on this list.
Okay.
And they're going to fall in all different ranges. There's going to be some guys, and obviously Fautanu's probably my number 1. He's for sure in the middle stand. I've talked about him for 6 months. But then there's going to be other guys like Trice that are in the mid-rounds, or Theo Johnson in the mid-rounds, or there's going to be late-round guys, or maybe, who knows, maybe guys that aren't drafted, but that I just come across and I say, I want that guy on my football team. I want Brillan Trice on my football team. I want him on my team. When I sat down with him, the words that his teammates said and his coaches said, you know, that I got on my little board here, unwavering, unflappable. 5 years. Took him some time to develop. He wasn't all this and all that coming out of high school, right? He redshirted, he grew, he developed. And, man, over the last 2 years, as I said, he was a force on that defense. It didn't have many others. He was the one huge disruptive difference maker.
You know what I like? I
What do
like
you
Brock's draft profiles. These are one of my favorite things we do every year. I really like these just because it takes such full advantage of what you do on, you know, Thursday, Friday, Saturday throughout the college football
When I leave
season.
you guys.
Yeah,
when
I love
leave
it.
you every weekend.
Yeah.
Right? At least, you know, if you're going to leave me every weekend.
Yeah, it's a little return on our investment
That's exactly
here,
right. Just give me a little something on the other side.
It's not just that. I love your insight, man. I just think it's so great what you know, the unique perspective you have on some of these guys, and it's different from so many of the other ways that the draft gets covered.